Have you ever wondered what separates organizations that thrive and retain public trust for decades from the ones that just implode spectacularly overnight?
Right, it's a huge question.
It is. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking at the very DNA of leadership and corporate survival. And we're going to treat this not as a morality tale, but as a mechanical teardown of how strategy actually works.
Yeah, it really is a fascinating contrast because we're looking at why some structures hold up under immense pressure while others simply collapse under their own weight. And honestly, the structural integrity of a company usually comes down to the people running it.
That makes perfect sense. And to figure this out, we have a really compelling stack of sources for today's deep dive.
Oh, we really do.
We're pulling from this brilliant YouTube breakdown of the infamous Enron accounting scandal by a channel called The Financial Controller. We've also got a financial news piece from The Guardian looking at the rather bizarre corporate acquisitions of Fraser's Group.
That one is wild.
Yeah, it really is. We're also incorporating a fantastic nonprofit PRO article on managing organizational change by Frank Abdale. And to tie all of this practical stuff together, we have two comprehensive academic papers by researchers Mary Kay Copeland and Al-Shamari and colleagues, exploring the vital rise of values-based leadership.
Which perfectly sets up our mission for this deep dive. We're going to unpack the mechanical failures of major corporate collapses, contrast them with models of true, enduring leadership, and extract actionable strategies you can use to navigate chaotic change without losing your core identity.
Exactly. And whether you're leading a massive corporate team, running a small business, or just trying to navigate your own career without compromising your principles, the insights in this deep dive will serve as a powerful shortcut to being well-informed.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's unpack this by starting with the ultimate cautionary tale of a structural collapse. We have to talk about Enron. Can you walk us through the mechanics of what actually happened there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Enron is the textbook example of a house of cards built on charisma instead of character.
Right.
To understand the timeline laid out by the financial controller, we have to start back in 1985. That's when CEO Ken Lay orchestrated the merger of Houston Natural Gas and Internorth.
And that merger created Enron.
Exactly. Things were relatively standard until a pivotal moment in 1990 when Lay hired a consultant from McKinsey named Jeff Skilling.
Right, and Skilling brought a very specific philosophy with him, didn't he?
He did. What's fascinating here is the accounting technique Skilling brought with him, which became the absolute architect of Enron's demise. In 1992, Skilling convinced the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, to approve an accounting method called mark-to-market for Enron's natural gas trading business. To understand why Enron failed, you really have to understand this specific mechanism.
Break that down for us. In layman's terms, how does mark-to-market actually work in this context?
Normally, if you build a major asset, say a power plant, you record the revenue as it actually comes in over the years, quarter by quarter.
Like any normal business.
Right. But under Skilling's mark-to-market technique, Enron was allowed to project the hypothetical future cash flows that this new power plant was expected to generate over its entire 20-year lifespan.
Over 20 years.
Yeah, and book all of that projected future cash flow as immediate revenue on their balance sheet today.
Which is just a wild way to do business. I mean, it's essentially treating a purely theoretical future as cold, hard cash in the present.
It is.
And the audacity of this gets even crazier. According to the breakdown, in the year 2000, Enron entered into a deal with Blockbuster to provide a video-on-demand service.
Oh, yeah, this is a crazy one.
Right. This was years before Netflix was successfully streaming. Enron was supposed to provide the broadband network.
A technology that, crucially, did not exist at the scale they needed.
Right.
The deal went absolutely nowhere. But because of mark-to-market accounting, Enron took the projected future profits from this theoretical Blockbuster streaming empire and booked it as actual revenue for the year 2000.
So they didn't have the tech, didn't make a dime, but put all those fake future dollars on the books anyway.
Exactly.
And that illusion of massive revenue growth inflated their stock from around $10 a share in 1990 to $85 a share by 2000. It looked like a brilliant investment to the outside world. But what kind of leadership allows that level of systemic deception?
Well, the academic research provides a great framework for this. Mary Kay Copeland's 2014 research categorizes leaders into 4 quadrants based on their mix of transformational abilities and their ethical foundations.
Okay.
Enron's leadership team sits firmly in quadrant 2. Copeland calls them the fakers. Talkers and not walkers. They are pseudo-transformational.
Meaning they have the vision, but not the character.
Precisely. Fakers possess incredibly high charisma, they talk a great game, they easily inspire people to follow them, and they project massive confidence. But they have absolutely zero authentic or ethical foundations. They use their transformational skills entirely for self-serving, ego-driven ends.
And when you're led by fakers, the bill eventually comes due. By 2001, the actual cash coming in just couldn't match the fake revenue on the books.
Right.
Enron declared bankruptcy. That $85 stock plummeted to about 50 cents. Everyday employees lost their entire pensions. Ken Lay was prosecuted but died before sentencing, and Skilling got a 12-year prison sentence.
Yeah, and shockingly, Skilling actually returned to pitch energy software in 2019.
You're kidding.
No, I'm serious. But we also have to look at the systemic failure here. It wasn't just Enron's internal leadership. Arthur Andersen, one of the top 5 accounting firms in the entire world at the time, was acting as their auditor.
How did a prestigious firm like that sign off on this?
It was a massive conflict of interest. Arthur Andersen was making millions more in consulting fees from Enron than they were in auditing fees.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they compromised their core function, which is independent verification, just to keep the client happy. The public trust was so eroded by their complicity that the entire 90-year-old accounting firm dissolved. It evaporated almost overnight.
Which brings us to the inevitable societal reaction. When a corporate disaster like Enron happens, the immediate reflex from the government is to build a massive regulatory fence to keep the fakers out. That gave us the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, specifically SOX Section 404.
Yes. Section 404 essentially legally mandates that management and the independent auditor must report on the absolute adequacy of the company's internal controls over financial reporting. Executives actually had to sign their names, taking personal legal responsibility for the math.
Okay, let me stop you there and play devil's advocate for a second. The Copeland Literature Review notes that complying with SOS costs the U.S. economy up to $1.4 trillion.
That's a massive number.
Right. But didn't that $1.4 trillion at least prevent another Enron? Surely those guardrails did something useful.
That's the logical assumption, but the data suggests otherwise. The critical limitation of regulation is that a law doesn't make a faker authentic.
Okay.
It's a bureaucratic band-aid. The absolute proof that it failed to change the underlying mindset of corporate leaders is the 2008 financial crash. Just a few years after SOX was implemented, massive, highly regulated institutions like Lehman Brothers and Bear Stearns collapsed.
Because of staggering, greed-driven risk-taking in the housing market.
Exactly. You had armies of compliance officers and $1.4 trillion in internal controls, but it couldn't stop leaders from acting recklessly when their internal values were fundamentally misaligned. You cannot simply legislate strategic integrity.
So what does this all mean? If $1 trillion worth of rules and regulations doesn't actually fix the root problem, what does? How do we build organizations that don't implode?
The cure, according to the academic literature, is a genuine operational shift to values-based leadership. If Enron is quadrant 2, the fakers, the cure is quadrant 4 in Copeland's model. The maximizers.
The maximizers.
Right. A maximizer is a leader who combines high transformational abilities, so the vision, the inspiration, with deep, unwavering, authentic foundations. They achieve long-term sustainable success because they cultivate ultimate trust.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The Al-Shamari paper provides some vivid case studies of this. Can you walk us through what a quadrant 4 maximizer actually looks like in the real world? Let's start with a classic example of sacrificing short-term profits for long-term trust.
You're referring to Johnson & Johnson in the early 1980s during the Tylenol crisis. It really remains the gold standard of crisis management.
Yes.
7 people had died after taking Tylenol capsules that had been maliciously tampered with and laced with cyanide. The CEO at the time, Jim Burke, faced an impossible choice. There was no regulatory body or law forcing him to recall the product nationwide.
But he did it anyway.
He pulled all Tylenol products off the shelves across the entire country. It was a massive, immediate financial hit to the balance sheet. But Burke did it because the company's stated values put the safety of the consumer above quarterly earnings.
Wow.
By absorbing that immense short-term pain, he completely saved the brand's long-term trust.
That's incredible. And the paper also highlights how maximizers treat their internal teams, right?
Yeah.
Look at Roger Enrico, the CEO of Pepsi in 1998.
Yes, Enrico literally gave up a percentage of his own executive salary so the company would match those funds.
Which is huge.
Right. And they put that money into a scholarship fund for the children of Pepsi's frontline employees.
Yeah.
He didn't just issue a memo about valuing workers, he put his own capital on the line to prove it.
And it changes how a company handles failure, too. The paper mentioned Citigroup in Japan back in 2004.
Right. When managers at Citigroup Japan were found to be involved in unethical banking activities, the executive leadership didn't launch a cover-up or throw low-level employees under the bus. Those managers were summarily dismissed, and the leadership publicly apologized to regulatory officials. It heralded a new era of shared ethical responsibility.
To understand how these leaders operate, the academic sources conceptualize this through something called the 4V model. How does that framework operate?
The 4V model is a great way to visualize this. It stands for values, vision, voice, and virtue. Values are the core principles you define. Vision is how you frame your actions within a larger purpose. Voice is your ability to articulate those values to your team.
And virtue.
Virtue is the continuous striving to actually do what is right. True leaders don't just act right themselves, they use their voice to act as moral managers. Their primary concern is proactively building the capacity of their followers, creating an environment where the right strategic choice is the default.
Creating that environment means your values have to be crystal clear. But what happens when your values and your corporate strategy get blurry? Let's look at a modern example of this from the Guardian piece on Fraser's Group.
This is a perfect modern contrast. Fraser's Group, formerly Sports Direct, is a massive retail empire in the UK. The founder, Mike Ashley, was famous in the financial world for his opportunistic, scattergun approach to business. He would just buy stakes in random companies like Debenhams or Hugo Boss if he thought the shares were cheap.
But recently, his son-in-law, Michael Murray, took over as CEO, and Murray explicitly promised a change in direction. He claimed the company was going to be highly disciplined. He told the press they would only buy things that fit into their sports and premium ecosystem.
Which sounds very strategic. Very quadrant 4. It implies a clear vision and clear values driving the checkbook.
Exactly. Until you look at their latest move. They just spent £75 million to acquire an 18.9% stake in a company called AO World. And AO World is an online retailer that sells fridges and freezers.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you have to look at the strategic disconnect here. How does an online fridge retailer fit into a sports and premium fashion ecosystem?
It doesn't.
Well, CEO Michael Murray argued that a sports company needs AO World's two-man delivery know-how so they can better deliver bulky home gym equipment to consumers.
Which sounds like a bit of a stretch. The financial journalist points out you don't need to spend £75 million buying a fifth of a company just to learn how to drive a delivery van. You could just sign a commercial logistics contract with them.
And that's the danger of a blurry ecosystem. When your values aren't clearly defined or when leadership merely pays lip service to a disciplined strategy, the organization reverts to its old habits. The article suggests that despite the new CEO's talk, the old ego-driven instinct to just act like a day trader and buy cheap shares is still running the show.
And it confuses the market. It dilutes brand equity.
Precisely. Contrast this opportunistic scattergun approach with the concept of having deeply rooted organizational values that dictate every single move you make, even when facing existential threats.
Which brings us to my absolute favorite part of this deep dive. We've talked about massive corporate fraud, regulation, and messy fridge acquisitions. Now let's pivot to a beautiful, unexpected example of strategic clarity from Frank Abdale's article in Nonprofit PRO. Walk us through what happened with the nuns in his case study.
This is a remarkable lesson in anchoring to the core. Abdale tells the story of an order of Roman Catholic nuns who were facing a terrifying reality: total extinction. They had just over 100 members left, their average age was 82, and they had 0 new recruits coming in.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, statistically, they knew their order would completely disappear in about 20 years.
Most organizations facing absolute extinction would panic. They'd pivot wildly, abandon their mission, or just dissolve in despair.
But not this group. Instead of panicking, they asked themselves a profound strategic question. What can we create today that will perpetuate our values in a world where we no longer exist?
That is the ultimate test of a maximizer.
It really is. They weren't trying to save their own jobs. They were trying to save their essence.
So what concrete steps did they take?
They looked at their core values. First, they had a deep commitment to social justice. So they sold off a significant portion of their assets to endow a local foundation. That capital now sustains a permanent training program for emerging social justice advocates. They essentially funded their own replacements.
And they also owned some incredibly valuable real estate, right?
Yes, they owned 30 acres of pristine landscape on the Hudson River. Because they valued being stewards of the earth, they didn't sell it to a corporate developer for a massive payout.
Right, they could have made millions.
Absolutely. But they donated it to the Westchester Land Trust, protecting it from development in perpetuity. They included a small cemetery and shaded groves with benches, specifically so future generations could come find peace.
Abdale uses this story to highlight 5 specific tools for leading through inevitable, chaotic change. How do those tools apply here?
Abdil says leaders must be patient, be inclusive, be clear, be persuasive, and be open. The nuns had to be patient, knowing this change would take 20 years. They had to be inclusive, ensuring even the oldest members had a voice in the transition. They were clear about the reality of their extinction. They were persuasive in getting buy-in for this legacy project. And they were open to the reality that their physical organization was ending. But Abdale's central mantra for managing the fear of change is this: you must focus first on what is not going to change.
Which is your core mission.
Yes. Whether you're facing a shifting market, a disruptive new competitor, or literally the end of your organization, the only way to navigate it strategically is to stand firmly on the solid ground of your shared values.
Okay, let's bring this all together. We've covered incredible ground today. We started with the catastrophic structural failure of Enron the Fakers in Quadrant 2, who used mark-to-market accounting to build an empire of theoretical cash, destroying pensions and obliterating public trust.
Yeah.
We saw how Arthur Andersen lost its way by prioritizing consulting fees over auditing integrity.
And we saw how throwing $1.4 trillion of SOX Section 404 regulations at the problem couldn't fix the underlying rot because you can't legislate mindset, which led right into the 2008 crash.
But then we found the strategic cure, the maximizers. Leaders like Jim Burke at J&J pulling Tylenol from the shelves and Roger Enrico funding scholarships at Pepsi. They proved that the 4V model values, vision, voice, and virtue isn't just a buzzword. It's a measurable, incredibly effective strategy for long-term survival.
We examined the confusing, blurry strategy of Fraser's Group buying up a white goods company, showing what happens when a stated vision is overridden by opportunistic, ego-driven habits.
And finally, we ended with the breathtaking clarity of the 82-year-old nuns who use their inevitable end to plant seeds of conservation and social justice that will outlast them by centuries. And that is the big takeaway for you listening right now. True leadership isn't just about avoiding a multi-billion-dollar accounting scandal. It's about striving to be a Quadrant 4 maximizer in whatever room you occupy. It's about letting your core values dictate your strategy, rather than letting your ego chase every passing opportunity.
This raises an important question, and it's something I want to leave you with today. We've talked about human egos and human values, but we are moving rapidly into an age of artificial intelligence, where corporate decisions, logistics, and strategy are increasingly automated.
Right.
So look at your own life, your team, or your company. If your current job or organization were guaranteed to completely disappear in 20 years, what exact values would you want to leave behind, and what actions are you taking today to make sure those values survive you?
That is a brilliant question to carry with you. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it gave you some aha moments and a new lens through which to view the organizations around you. Keep learning, keep questioning, and we'll catch you next time.